so here's a set of misconceptions that can lead us to compassion fatigue. So one of them is that I can somehow fix the world, solve the problem, make everything okay. And the longer that we do this kind of work, the less we tend to believe that. But I think it's very helpful to kind of shoot dead that myth early on for people that are just beginning their work in helping professions. And I'm not sure that's being done. It certainly wasn't done when I went into the ministry in 1976. I think that everybody was so disturbed that I was female that they didn't think about any kind of training about what to do about the job. So we learn over time that we can do the best we can do with what we have under the circumstances that we find ourselves in. But this misconception of I can run in here and fix this, we learn that that's not so true. I'm responsible for outcomes. How many of you tell yourself I'm responsible for outcomes? No?
Not anymore.
Oh, not anymore? Well, that's good. One of the things that's happening in mental health practice, and I believe in social services, is what's called outcome-based assessment. Have you heard this? Outcomes-based assessment? Well, the point is, in mental health services, the point is that insurance companies don't want to pay for things that don't work, okay? And funders in social services don't want to pay for programs that aren't effective. And so there's a big push to using empirical strategies and measures to prove that whatever program you have, whatever mental health services you're delivering, actually have scientifically supported positive outcomes. So this is a trend across all social service kinds of disciplines, is outcome-based assessment, which I think is dangerous because of this very myth that we're all being pressed to prove that what we do is effective.
Yeah, I mean, there's some people that were here a couple months ago when we met, and I was a whole different person just because of that, because I worked at an agency that the pressure was so, I worked there a year, the pressure was so intense, I was so traumatized because of just this reason.
Yeah, it's like I'm responsible for outcomes. Yep. And, we have this, I'm not going to get into the FCAT debate, but the FCAT debate is based on this presumption that I, as a teacher, am responsible for outcomes. And if I can't produce, then all kinds of bad things, including salary cuts and job losses, are coming to me.
Two comments. One, I think a lot of this is because we're taking a lot of these things over from the business world, where metrics are very, very important. Right. And the whole idea of like salesmanship. Salesmen are held accountable for how much they sell. And they don't care if the market's up or the market's down or whatever. I mean, that's what this whole Glenn Ross is about.
Yeah.
The idea of putting it all on the person as if they can control all of the factors that deal with a good outcome. On the other hand, isn't it really psychologically difficult if you are in a helping profession to not care about the outcome?
Well,
isn't it just natural to want a good outcome?
Well,
you're pouring all this work in. It's very hard to say, oh, but I don't really care which way it works.
Maybe it's just a semantic argument, but I would say it's fine to care. But if I'm carrying the burden of the responsibility of the outcome, that's different. Yes, I've got to have enough passion to keep me getting up every day and going to do this thing and bringing all of my wherewithal to try to aim for good outcomes. But there's so many other factors. Like all of us work, and you all know this better than I do, when you're working in the trenches with people who have lots of needs. We have issues of poverty, we have issues of education, we have language differences, we have racism, we have all kinds of factors that are beyond the control of the actual worker that impact people's choices and decisions and compliance and all of that sort of thing. And those are the items that are measured in outcome studies. So yeah, your point's well taken. Yes?
I understand your point that the organizations may be looking at a bottom line, but personally, I mean, we have to accept the fact that if someone is truly wanting help and truly seeking change, then they will change. That's up to them. I can't look for them.
Right.
All I can do is help them.
All I can do is like provide an environment, resources, presence, and they have to respond to it.
So that's very freeing.
It is freeing.
Well, and the other fallacy is that you may be in a situation where there's no possibility of a good outcome. Chronic illness.
Yes.
The person has a chronic illness. There is no cure. The only way it's going to end is when the person dies. And the best thing you can do is to make them comfortable, to help them as much as you can. But when that's the situation, then when you're trying to measure something by a positive outcome, what's the positive
What is the outcome?
Yeah.
Unless,
the person's going to decline either fast or slow, but they're going to decline.
But I guess you have to figure out, well, in that case, you would say, like you just described, the positive outcome is that their quality of life, their relationships, their end-of-life experience is better than if I weren't here doing what I'm doing.
But you can't measure that.
But you can't measure that because the person's dead and can't fill out the form at the end.
The crux of the matter for me personally, I think, is realizing who's in charge and I'm not. You know, I mean, that's where my spirituality comes into that, is because the outcomes are not my responsibility. And if I can get out of the way and allow whatever spiritual life I have to just be what it is, then I'm a lot healthier.
Exactly. And I think that that's really important. I don't know if you heard what she said, is to get out of the way and kind of let the power of the Spirit fill in after you've given your best. That's what I hear you saying, yeah.
I think we could learn something from AA in this respect. They're not responsible for somebody stopping drinking. They're responsible for a climate of sobriety that you can get well in if you choose to.
If you choose to,
and
right.
that may be the only thing you can offer the situation.
Right, and I think that many of us know this intuitively or had to learn from experience this thing about not responsible for outcomes, but there are lots of messages around us that tell us that we are. And so continuing to remember that I'm responsible for my piece, but I'm not doing this alone, and that I'm going to offer the best I can. Clients have to decide that that's what they want. Yes?
I do think, though, that we have to be careful because we've all experienced, say, government workers who've, over time and years of dealing with this, where they've put up walls and put up obstacles and created sort of a insular way to protect themselves that then is not doing their best, or, you know what I mean? I just think we need to keep that in mind.
Okay, we're going to come to that a little later, so let's continue to talk about it. But good point. I mean, there's a point of self-protection that makes you ineffective. But we're going to talk about ways of doing self-care so you can continue to be effective over time, and that's coming. Yes?
Last time when we were all together, those that were here last time too, we also talked about the word, which I feel is very important, is boundaries.
And we're going there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
boundaries.
ties into that.
Yeah, and that's coming down the way. A few more slides. But thank you for bringing that up. If I care enough, everything will be okay. Well, that's kind of connected to the other one. And the hurting people I help will appreciate everything I do for them. That's laughable. I mean, some of you are kind of looking like, oh yeah, really? Many of the times they don't appreciate anything you're doing, and because we have to have regulations and rules when we operate facilities and programs, lots of clients don't appreciate those kinds of expectations. So I think dealing with seeking others' approval is really difficult, because most people who get involved in this kind of work really respond to approval and praise. And when we don't get it, then that sort of begins to erode some of the passion for it. Is that we get reinforced by people being appreciative of what we do. I have enough resources to fix things. That seems like one of the most laughable things, because any of the work I've ever done in social services and churches, there are never enough resources to meet the goals. I have a friend that has an interesting saying, and she says that it's not a problem if you can fix it with money, even if you don't have the money. It's a real problem when the issue can't be fixed with money. And you're looking at me kind of funny, but think about this for a second. I mean, problems in relationships can't be fixed with money. Health issues can't be fixed with money necessarily. Chronic illness can't be fixed with money. Spiritual connection can't be fixed with money. So it kind of, even though we don't have the resources, if we did, not all things can be fixed with money. So even if we had the largest homeless shelter on earth, people would have to want to go there. And their will can't necessarily be fixed with money. It's part of what you were saying in terms of people have to really respond. Even if we have the best services, resources aren't always the last answer. Significant people in my life, I love this one. Significant people in my life will support and approve my absence from this relationship while I invest in my compassionate mission. So people in my life will support and approve of my absence from my relationship to do this work. Many of us learn that the hard way by having to confront problems in our significant relationships because of neglecting them in an effort to do the work that we feel like we're called to do. And the last one, I know what I'm getting into. Those of you who are clergy, don't you just kind of take a deep breath every time you officiate at a wedding? Think, hello? You don't really know what you're getting into. Or anytime anybody takes vows to be part of the clergy or vows to be part of a relationship or becomes a teacher or signs on the line to do a particular job, we don't know what we're getting into. Even if we've already done the job, we don't know what it's new every time we go and do it again. So while we have to have job descriptions, they never are adequate. Those last lines, and other duties as needed.
I think it should be careful of what you ask for you
might get it. Yeah, so kind of like 5 last words, other duties as needed. That's what we don't know what we're getting into. Other myths, I can do it alone. And I've certainly learned that the collaborative approach is much more effective than trying to manage any kind of helping work alone. If I'm spiritual enough, I can deal with the stress of working with suffering people. So on one hand, we have to have a grounded spirituality. We have to realize that outcomes aren't based solely on our own efforts. And if we go to the other side and say, well, because I have such a strong spiritual connection, that in itself is going to make it possible for me to deal with this stress. And it's definitely a factor, but it's not necessarily sufficient for managing the stress.